Tuesday, the 28th, after having been kept 3 days destitute of clothes, part of my baggage was sent to me upon opening my writing desk in the presence of Lieutenant Parker of the Griffin. I found that advantage had been taken while it was in the custody of the governor's agents, in whose possession it remained from the time Lieutenant Colonel Wynyard took charge of it until delivered to my servant on the 27th instant, in the presence of Lieutenants Codd and Reardon of the 66th Regiment, to take out of it all the jewelry, with the exception of a cornelian necklace of trifling value. After having minutely examined my trunks, I wrote the following letter to Rear Admiral Plampton. Sir, it is with considerable regret that I feel myself obliged to address you upon the losses which I have sustained in consequence of the unprecedented and arbitrary proceedings which have been adopted towards me by the civil authority of St. Helena. My baggage, which by Colonel Wynyard's direction was removed from Longwood on Saturday the 25th at 8 o'clock at night, was taken to Hudsgate, detained there until Monday. My servants forced away from it, notwithstanding Colonel Wynyard's promise of the contrary at Longwood, and although he was informed that there were no locks upon my trunks, etc., clandestinely rummaged my writing desk open and plundered of the following valuables: a gold watch chain and several gold seals and key, a very valuable carved onyx brooch set in gold, a gold hand-shaped ditto, a valuable brilliant, a gold ring set with diamonds, one with aquamarina, another with a cat's eye, and other articles of jewelry, etc., to a large amount, some of them being inestimable to me in consequence of having received them as presents. What losses in money I may have sustained I know not, as I'm ignorant of the number of dollars I possessed. I cannot pretend, sir, to judge of the intentions of those who countenanced such perpetrations, but I conceive that every principle of probity would have ordained that if an examination was deemed necessary, such should have taken place either in my own presence, my servants, or some person authorized by me, and that one of my domestics ought to have been allowed to remain with my effects after they had been removed from Longwood. I forbear to mention the severe losses which I have sustained in consequence of the precipitate mode in which I was hurried off the island, the insulting manner of it, and the general arbitrary and barbarous treatment which I have suffered. But I have thought it my duty to lay before you, sir, as Commander-in-Chief of the service to which I belong, the foregoing slight sketch of some of the losses I have sustained, more especially as a letter I have addressed it to Major Goriker, acting military secretary, has been returned to me unopened, and I am bound to conclude thereby that any further remonstrance or complaint on my part would meet with similar treatment. Barry E. O'Meara, Surgeon. To Rear Admiral Plampton, Commander-in-Chief, St. Helena. Reply. Sir, I have this moment received your letter of this day's date complaining of certain losses you have sustained in consequence of your baggage not having been taken proper care of when removing from Longwood, also complaining of the mode in which you were sent off the island, for neither of which circumstances can I consider myself responsible. I have, however, caused a copy of your letter to be taken, which I shall instantly enclose to His Excellency the Governor. I cannot conclude this without expressing my surprise that you should not have made this communication to me sooner, more especially as the departure of the Griffin has been hourly expected to take place ever since yesterday noon. Rob Plampton, Rear Admiral Commander-in-Chief. On receipt of the above, addressed another letter to Rear Admiral, and of which the following is a copy. Sir, in explanation, I have the honor to inform you that the delay in forwarding to you the statement detailed in my letter of this day's date was caused by my servant, who is a material evidence, not having been permitted to come on board until midday yesterday, at which time also the remainder of my luggage arrived, the examination of which on board, in order to ascertain if any of the articles supposed to be stolen had been during the rummaging thrown into the other trunks, took up a considerable time, as I did not like to hazard any assertion which was not founded upon fact. Barry O'Meara. To Rear Admiral Plampin. On the 31st, I was summoned on shore by the following letter to attend a court of inquiry, which had been ordered to sit at the castle, St. Helena, 31st of July, 1818. Sir, Rear Admiral Plampin, having referred to the consideration of the governor a letter you have addressed to him dated 31st July, stating certain losses which you mentioned to have sustained on the occasion of the removal of your baggage from Longwood to the town, I am directed by His Excellency the Governor to inform you that the acting magistrate, who is now sitting, will receive your deposition of the facts stated in your letter to the admiral. The civil officer who will deliver this letter to you will accompany you to the castle, where the magistrate is now sitting. Your obedient servant, Thomas H. Brooks, Secretary to Government. To Barry O'Meara, Esquire. Scarcely had I proceeded halfway up the Merino, in obedience to this summons, ere I was arrested by a sentinel who had orders to that effect from Sir Hudson Lowe, and detained until released by Town Major Cole. Although I was accompanied by a civil officer who brought the summons, at the castle I was interrogated on oath by the acting magistrate, and my answers taken down in writing, but a copy of my deposition was by order of Sir Hudson Lowe refused to be given to me, and my servant who applied for a copy of this received a similar answer. Whether any steps may have been taken for the recovery of my property or to discover and punish the delinquents, I know not, as I have never received any further intelligence on the subject. A copy of the affidavit made by my servant on his arrival in London will be found in the appendix number 7. Independent of the loss caused by the above-mentioned robbery, I sustained an other of upwards of £200 in consequence of not having been permitted to enter into explanations with my creditors relative to many articles and necessaries which I had bought for the inmates of Longwood, but which had been charged in my account. Notwithstanding the silence which has been so scrupulously maintained by the authorities to whom the plunder of my effects was represented, I do not despair of obtaining ultimate satisfaction, much less abandon my claims to the protection of those laws which have been so glaringly violated by some person still unknown, but whom I shall take the most effectual means within my reach of exposing to legal punishment and holding up to that public scorn which their infamous conduct so justly merits. Such are the few specimens of the system established by Sir Hudson Lowe in St. Helena, forming but a small part of those which might be cited to illustrate the character of one whom the author of the facts represents as being someone not only amiable in the highest degree in private life and general society, but with a rigid sense of duty, feeling alive to the peculiar situation of his prisoner, and actively employed in the contrivance of comforts for him. With the foregoing details and the observations which I felt myself called upon to accompany them before the public, there are ample materials whereon to ground its final decision. I should therefore have thought it high time to close these remarks, already extended far beyond the original intention, were it not that the importance of the subject and a desire to make the nation fully acquainted with all the circumstances having any relation to a matter in which its character for honor and humanity is deeply involved, induces me to communicate some highly important information that has recently arrived in England from the scene of Napoleon's imprisonment since my compulsory removal from the island in July 1818 until January 1819. Interruption of the medical treatment of Napoleon for 5 months took place, as he would not receive the surgeon attempted to be imposed upon him by Sir Hudson Lowe. Subsequently to that period, General Montallon's agent in London has received a copy of a note addressed by him to Sir Hudson Lowe, dated 19th of January, 1819, and some bulletins and other official documents, with a perusal of which he has favored me. By these, it appears that Napoleon had 4 or 5 times experienced symptoms foreboding an attack of apoplexy in the course of different nights, and on the 17th of January last, one of so alarming a nature that they imagined for a moment disillusion had taken place. Upon his reviving a little, Count Bertrand proposed to him to call in Dr. Verling, which he refused. Cette seule proposition, says General Montalon in his note to Sir Hudson Lowe, ôtera sa physionomie accrue le mal dans le moment. It's very altered. General Bertrand then called in Mr. Stokoe at 1 o'clock in the morning. He did not arrive until 4 hours afterwards, as the orderly officer was not authorized to send for him without asking leave of the governor. Then the admiral, who lived a mile and a half from the town, was to be consulted, and his permission obtained prior to sending on board the Conqueror for the surgeon, which added greatly to the delay. On the latter's arrival at Longwood, he proceeded to Count Bertrand, who proposed, as Napoleon was very ill, that Mr. Stokoe should replace me as surgeon to Napoleon, and submitted him to 7 following articles, which were also sent to the governor.